Hi, and welcome to another edition of Marketing from the Chicken Shop, where I talk all things restaurant marketing from the best fried chicken shop in London, which is Chicken, right here in Baker Street. And recently we did an amazing event called Chickfest, which was just as good as it sounds, where we got some of our favourite customers and we tried out new dishes on them. And not only was it a great event that everyone loved, but also we got awesome feedback on the food and on the restaurant. And it just got me thinking, what can restaurant owners do better to get the customer feedback, because it's so important. And I know for a lot of you, it's the process of getting customer feedback is either non-existent or at best pretty scrappy. And really, it should be a continual process where you're constantly getting feedback and making improvements. And for me, that's really how you take your hospitality to the next level. So, just a few thoughts that I'm going to share with you. So, some things that I've learned. Because I've tried a lot of different ways of getting customer feedback, is number one, even for myself as well, but as a restaurant owner, like normally you can be too close to the business in terms of seeing what needs to be fixed, and there's some things that are so obvious, but it's only when it takes a customer, quite often your regulars will point something out, and you're like, wow, that's great insight. And I mean, another thing for your customers as well is don't underestimate them, because they have some amazing insights. I've had customers have told me things that are brilliant and really, really helpful and useful. And don't forget, if you're like any restaurant owner, you probably don't have that much time to go out. But bear in mind that a lot of your customers, they eat out all the time, so they do know what they're talking about. So this is like free knowledge, and you'd be crazy not to get. And then, so this is really my opinion and like how I like to work, and other people might think differently, but I really like to build a community. I find that's what, the more you build a community, the better your social media is, and the more people are going to come back to your restaurant. So the more you get people involved in your journey, in your process, and just break down that barrier between the customer and the restaurant, the more people are they're gonna have that more of an emotional attachment, which is the most important thing, because they're not coming to eat your food, they're coming for an emotional experience. And if you show that you listen to them and that you're going to improve and they really have input, they are really going to get that much more involved in your restaurant. Okay, so another thing that I've learned is, and I've been guilty of this as well, is you just never be boring when you're trying to get customer feedback, or actually don't be boring with anything you do with the restaurant. So I've noticed that a lot of times you give this amazing hospitality experience, but then anything, whether you're talking on Instagram or you're doing a customer survey or whatever, it's suddenly you get into this boring corporate marketing speak, and it's just boring and it's jarring, because it doesn't fit in with your brand, and it's almost like suddenly when anything to do with marketing or putting yourself out there, it just suddenly becomes a serious face. Okay, now we're going to talk about market research. So don't, just be yourself and turn it on its head. Make it fun. Be who you are, and bring that into any of your touch points, any of the ways that you talk to your customers. And another thing is always give incentives. If you're going to ask people to give feedback, give an incentive, and don't make it a crap one, because you're not assuming that your restaurant isn't an art project, it's a business. And if you're asking people for feedback, it means you want to make more money, and you should respect that. I find I find it can be quite jarring as well if you're sitting in a restaurant and then suddenly from nowhere you start getting hit with all these kind of market research type questions, or even at the end of the meal when you brought that card, if you'd like to leave, if you'd like to fill out a few questions, I find it's jarring. But if you give an incentive, it shows a lot more respect, and I will be a lot more open to doing that. So how do you actually get customer feedback? Now, some of the obvious ones are regularly checking your reviews, and it's better rather than just do a monthly summary, especially on Google, which is of course so important to get you up in the Google rankings. And it's very dependent on the Google reviews you're getting. Try and chart it every week, because if you just do it every month, a lot of details can get lost, and maybe you had a few bad weeks, you had team issues, or whatever. So really, you should be trying to check it every week. The other is social media. Again, of course, I'm sure that you are checking social media to see what people are saying. But one thing is, if you ask questions on social media for feedback or about improvements, you'll get it back. But this is another prime example of like, try and make it fun. Don't be too corporate and boring. And so I've talked about at the end of the meal, so you can ask questions, but I think again it can be really jarring if done wrong, and it's got to be done really unobtrusively. So I think it's up to the team member to gauge the level of interaction. But if it feels right, then to ask questions, but try and have a bit of structure. So try and think of some good questions to ask and make sure that your team are asking those questions. And then make sure that you regularly review with your team as well, because quite often there's some amazing insights your team have, but if you're not collecting them, then it gets lost as well. So another way is surveys, and these can take various forms. As I mentioned, you can just give a card at the end of the meal saying, we'd love it if you could answer a few questions, but make sure you give an incentive, otherwise it's going to be a crappy experience. The other is you can send out an email survey to your list, and again, make it sound fun, give a good incentive for filling out the survey, and be transparent. Always be transparent, and let people know why. Let people know why you're doing that. And also, you can, and it's kind of tied to the email list, is if you have Wi-Fi registration, maybe you do, maybe you don't. In my clients, they all do, and I always find it a great way to build the list. Is once people have registered for your Wi-Fi, quite often I'll just send an automatic email afterwards asking them to leave a review at the restaurant. But you can just stop that for a bit and replace that again with one of the surveys. And all you do is you send an email, and I mean two very easy ways for getting online, for doing online surveys. Is number one is Google Forms, and number two is Typeform, which is my favourite because you can make beautiful looking forms and it's free, and for a bit more money you can make them look even better. So you can try either of those. Now another one that I've done is exit interviews, and this tends to work better with fast casual restaurants. And this is where, and I've done this for a month, and it was painful, and it was, to be honest, boring. But the insight was amazing, where I was standing at the door, and whenever someone would come out, I'd be like, sorry, would you mind if I just asked you a few questions? And actually that time I didn't offer an incentive, and looking back on it, maybe I should have done. I think that would have been a better, more on-brand experience. But what was amazing was that so many people were willing to share their feedback with me, and it was great feedback. And these are people who were coming in on their lunch breaks. So, you know, they were busy and they had to run off, but they still were willing to take the time. And I mean, yeah, so the insight I got from that was brilliant. And things like, even, I remember that was when we got the great feedback on Instagram, because what it told us, it was quite early on in that restaurant's time, and there were only maybe 2,000 or 3,000 followers. But what happened was that everyone had heard about us through Instagram, and they'd remember posts from months ago, which I thought was amazing. But what it showed was the power of Instagram, because the reach was way beyond what we could measure on followers and likes and comments. So things like that, you'll only find out if you can actually talk to people face to face. And as I said, that's a bit harder in a regular. If you've got a sit-down restaurant, that's a little bit harder. I mean, you can have a think of ways around that, but then that brings me on to my next thing, and this is my favourite way to get feedback, is doing an event, because that's where you can get some. Well, I'm not a big fan of influencer events, but that's a rant for another time. But you can get a mix of ideally your favourite customers and maybe a few people with a bit of an audience, and you feed them and you get feedback, and it's just, you get brilliant feedback, and it ticks so many other boxes, like so many that I'm going to talk about it in another post. And then the final thing is, so you've collected all that feedback. Okay, great. So not only do you have to do something with it, but prove to people, show them that you're doing something with it, because that is really the key, and that's what gets people. That's what makes you stand out, because that's what gets people onto your journey. And you need to show it. So whether you're going to make that chili sauce a little bit hotter, or you're going to update a menu, or you're going to make some changes to the menu and take something off, or add something on, or get people to vote on a dish. It's almost like you occasionally have to make a show that you listen to people, and that's really, again, that comes back to, you do that, and that's how you're going to build a community. So I hope you found that useful. And just to conclude, try and work out how you can get a regular process for customer feedback. Don't be cheesy. Just be yourself. Make it fun. Turn things on their head. Make people want to give you feedback, and you'll be on your way to creating a great community and something to think about. Think about an awesome event you can do that really is like you feeding people, because people love to be food critics. That's what I learned as well. Like, people love to give feedback, but if they can see that you are sitting there listening to them, and which is, they'll be more willing to do that than an online form. Anyway, until the next time, bye.